Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another webinar by While Poland, which is the Polish affiliate of the World Institute for Action Learning. My name is Tom and I will lead this webinar for you. And today we have an amazing guest on the show. She is a learning and development consultant, a master action learning coach, an executive coach, and the managing director of B Leadership. Shannon Banks is with me today. Hi, Shannon. How are you doing?
Hi, Tom. I'm good, thank you. Nice to be with you today.
Shannon, since this is a webinar about action learning, I'd like to ask you this question. What is action learning for you?
Well, it's one of the things I use that's most powerful in terms of really providing value for my clients and helping leaders learn and also make progress on important challenges at the same time. I was introduced to it a long time ago when I was in corporate life, and I really didn't expect to carry on using it to the extent that I do, to be honest, but it's so powerful and so valuable that I actually use it a lot in the work that we do.
Can you say a few words more about how you got involved with action learning?
Sure, yeah. So I worked at Microsoft for 17 years, and at some point during my career, I moved into a role where I was responsible for high potential development for a set of leaders worldwide. And as part of that, I was asked to be the thought leader for action learning. And we didn't really have a very well-defined definition for action learning. We any stretch project that the company ran, we called it action learning. And actually it wasn't very well received, and there was quite a lot of negativity around it. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know that I want this. Like, I was actually really nervous about taking that part of the job on. And so I did what most good OD consultants would do. I started doing diagnostics to find out like why this was the way it was, and quite quickly learned that basically any stretch project the company ran, they called action learning. And they would reach out to like senior leaders in the organization to find problems to work on. And the senior leaders all told me, if I have a real and urgent problem, I have somebody else already working on it. So either I give them a problem that somebody else is already working on, or I give them kind of a tier 2 problem that's not that real and urgent. And so I thought, well, that seems like obvious why this isn't very effective. Mm-hmm. And so somehow in that, we got introduced to While. Actually, it was through a colleague that some of you may know. Anita Basin was working at Microsoft at that point, and she found the World Institute for Action Learning, and we met Mike Marquardt, and we thought that could really change things. And so that was how I got introduced to action learning. I got certified as a coach way back then. And the rest is history.
Okay. So what exactly do you do? What kind of projects do you run right now as the managing director of B Leadership?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I've had my company now for 7 years, and it's a leadership development company predominantly. And our core focus is helping organizations bring their social purpose to life through their people. And so we do work that support leaders to make a stronger business impact at the same time as having a strong social impact, and to help them understand the importance of that in their leadership. So we offer a whole range of learning experiences. So what we're looking at is trying to help them gain the skills and the self-awareness they need to be more effective. And so it's everything from large-scale leadership development programs to team engagement workshops, to one-to-one executive coaching.
Right.
And as part of that, we have expertise in action learning. So all of our coaches are action learning certified, and we integrate it into the work that we do.
So let's focus on action learning projects. When you use action learning in your projects, what kind of projects are they? And can you say a few words more about how they're structured? If we take a look at the details of the projects, what do they look like?
Sure. And tell me if you'd like more detail, Tom.
Okay.
So Often they're part of a larger leadership development experience, sometimes very core to that, but there is stuff around that. So we don't like sell action learning for action learning's sake. We sell programs, and the effectiveness of action learning speaks for itself and kind of
Right.
becomes part of that experience because it adds value. So that's often the way we work with action learning. And I can give you an example of that. Maybe that would be helpful. So we run a program with one of our clients, which is, and we have many, but I'll give this one as an example because we're actually getting ready to run our 10th cohort. So it's been a long running program. It's with BNP Paribas, which is a bank that's headquartered in France. And what we do in that program, it's called the Social Enterprise Hackathon. And we bring together a cohort of global leaders from the bank alongside partners that are social partners. So either social enterprises or charities that have a business challenge. Okay, so we identify charities and social enterprises that have a leadership or business challenge that they need support on. And we bring the two organizations, or the 7 partners in this case, and the bank together. And we do a lot of setup around the vision and mission of the bank and the social purpose of the bank and the skills that leaders need in today's environment. And then we use action learning to work on the challenges that those organizations face. So it's part of a week-long program.
Yeah. So in action learning, we could distinguish between like 2 major types of programs: single problem action learning projects or sessions, and multi-problem action learning projects or sessions. So the one that you just mentioned fits more into the single problem model, right?
That's correct. Yeah. It's 7 single problem action learning programs running simultaneously is what it is.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what exactly single problem and multi-problem projects are, really quick, distinct definition, let's say. Single problem projects or sessions focus on one single problem that is brought by the organization. You have a team that is working on that problem to ultimately solve it and bring the change in the organization. And multi-problem sessions are more about one group, let's say talent development group or managers, leaders, meeting every now and again, let's say every 3 or 4 weeks throughout a period of 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe a year, I guess maximum. And they talk about different problems that they individually bring into the session, and every session may focus on different problems. So that's why they call multi-problems, because you have many problems in a single meeting. It's interesting what you, Shannon, said before about what it was like in Microsoft, because you said that you went to the leaders for some problems that they could give to the teams, to the action learning teams, and they said that when they have an urgent problem, they already have somebody working on the problem, right? And that's actually a strategy we sometimes take to run single problem projects. That's how action learning very often is taught. If you have a single problem project or an idea for it, go to the board, go to the top leaders, make them tell you what the important and complex and urgent challenges right now are in the company, and let that team solve that problem. So what is your take on that? What is your approach when you want to run a single problem project?
I'm probably a bit of an outlier within the World Institute for Action Learning. So I think that can be effective, but I think in order for that to be really impactful, the team has to have full accountability, and the sponsor has to agree to basically take the actions that the team recommend. And from my experience, that doesn't always happen. And so then I think, oh, well, it's less effective. And so, and maybe it doesn't happen all the time because of the challenges I told you I observed and heard at Microsoft.
Right.
So what I what we typically do with Be Leadership is make sure that the problem owner and the person fully accountable is part of the team. And they stay part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the case. As you say, there are plenty of successful action learning programs run in a different way, but that's not what I typically do, because I want to make sure that the work done is fully actionable and that the person is fully aligned with the work that's gone on.
Mm-hmm. So you do take that strategy that you go to the top leaders and you make them tell you what the problems are. It's just you make sure that the team is accountable and the problem owner is within the team.
If I would take that approach, I would make sure of that. Normally, I have the top leader then join the team and become part of the action learning group. Mm-hmm. If in the programs that I run.
At the beginning of our conversation, when you were talking about your beginnings with action learning, you said that at that time you didn't really think that action learning would be so impactful and that you would get so much involved with action learning. So what do you find in action learning that really made it so useful for you, and because of which you have become so much involved with action learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so first of all, I started my business pre-pandemic. We were doing everything in person. So some of this applies to both online and in person. And then I've got some specific online comments to make too. So generally, like, I think it's just a really powerful learning experience that helps leaders be more impactful in this environment that's so volatile and so complex. Even before the pandemic, we were living in a world that was moving really fast, and we talked a lot in Be Leadership about the changes that were happening due to technology. And I think that's hard. It's a hard environment for leaders to really learn within and keep up with. And I think action learning, you get through the problem solving process faster, actually. And the coach makes sure that the balance is kept between the learning and the action, which is so infrequently the case outside of action learning. And so I think that's number one. I think it helps leaders understand the power of diversity and inclusion, which is so important right now and should always be. And basically, when we form action learning groups, we try to get as diverse a group as possible. And as you well know, and what people often say when they leave action learning is, wow, I now really appreciate the power of consulting people in a problem where maybe they aren't directly involved and have different experiences to bring. And so I just think that's massively powerful, and it's often something my clients need. And so it's a logical method to go to. And then I think because we're so focused on social purpose, the ability to connect to social purpose and help bring non-subject matter experts in to support another organization, that's just so amazingly powerful. So all of that applies online or in person. And then I think within the pandemic, I've been so grateful that we've had this way of engaging effectively and helping leaders learn virtually, because that's hard. And I think action learning is equally powerful online as it is in person. And that's just fantastic.
You did say a few words about what feedback you hear from your participants of action learning project and session. Can you say a few words more about what they say after those sessions and after those projects? What else do they say?
Well, what I should start with is I'm kind of blown away that you can run like a 45-minute demo session of action learning or a 5-month program in action learning, and you pretty much consistently hear the same huge ahas. So this isn't to diminish the 5-month thing. It's more to say it's really hard to describe action learning, but within like an hour of it, people usually have the same huge, like, insights. So one is the power of open questions. Always, always, always comes up. People are kind of blown away by how hard that is to ask open questions, and then how much it changes the dynamic when they do. The power of not jumping to solutions always comes up. We are paid to solve problems and get to solutions, and we don't always take the time that we should to make sure we're all working on the same problem. And so that always comes up from people that, wow, I was working on the wrong problem. I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
And then, as I mentioned, this importance of diversity and learning from diverse views, and how that allows people to get to better breakthroughs and new insights, like that comes up consistently.
Hmm.
And then I guess just the ability to get to really strong outcomes in a short period of time. It's funny because on the one hand, people get almost frustrated at some point early in action learning, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is taking so long. And then
Yeah.
the solutions are really fast at the end. And so I think, really it's an amazingly efficient problem solving method, even if the time is spent in a different way to the way people typically work.
So let's also say a few words about the multi-problem sessions. We did say a few words about the single problem projects, but before our conversation, before I pressed recording or record, you said that you also run some multi-problem projects.
Yeah,
Some
you do.
yeah, some people here may not know how exactly they are structured and what exactly happens, even though I gave a very quick definition a few minutes ago. Can you say how you do it and what your sessions and projects look like in the multi-problem variety?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because actually I think that's another very different way of using action learning that we find really effective. So typically the client problem that we hear when we suggest using this is that, for example, there's an executive team that's really siloed and not necessarily working well together, and there's like lack of trust, lack of team psychological safety. Um, so if I hear that from a client, then I might recommend some multi-problem action learning work. The other scenario that we use it is within leadership development programs, where there's like a theme like transformation, and we use it so leaders can hear about each other's transformational challenges and support each other. So you did a great job defining it. It's basically about each person in the group gets an opportunity to share a challenge that's real to them, and they coach each other. We sometimes call it a learning circle. It really is a team coaching method. All of this is really team coaching. And I can kind of describe, I think, two different programs. So there's one program that we've run a number of years with a client. We used to do it in person, and it was one day of multi-problem action learning. So that's kind of interesting. But basically, they had 3 modules in this program. The first module was working on self as an individual leader. The second module was working at kind of the team level and thinking about themselves within their teams. And then the third module was about organization. And so in the second module, the first module, they did self-assessments and they worked on themselves, and there wasn't really an action learning component. But in the second module, we did multi-problem action learning, and they each brought a challenge, and it was over a course of a day. So it was a long-ish day with a group of 5 people. And during that day, each person got just over an hour to focus on a challenge that they were facing, and they would coach each other. And then go back to the single problem action learning, in the third module where we were working on organizational leadership, we had a senior leader bring a challenge, and that same team worked on that single problem for the course of a day. And that leader, to my point earlier, stayed with the group as part of the action learning group to take the actions forward. So that was kind of how we combined multi-problem and single problem in one leadership development kind of journey. We also will use it virtually, similarly to you described. So over the pandemic, we have clients that have had these siloing issues that I mentioned. And we've done programs where, let's say it's a group of 6, team of 6, we've done 8 sessions, 2 hours each over a 6-month period or whatever, where each time, the first one, usually we do kind of the setup and we have one person bring a problem. Then we had 2, 2, 2. And then the last one, we would have one person bring a challenge and we would do a learning review. So it'd be extended over time, like you described.
Very interesting. I have one question, though,
Yes,
because some people may be concerned about one difficulty that may come up when you have this situation that, HR people say, let's do the project for these leaders, and there is little trust among them. They don't really cooperate. So you can offer the multi-problem project, right? But what if the lack of trust is really the difficulty that may prevent them from sharing those challenges? Do you ever experience that? And if yes, how do you handle it? The fact that they don't really cooperate, they don't really trust each other. It may not be so visible. Let's say they talk together in a fairly good way, fairly pleasant and kind of constructive way, but they are sort of reluctant to share their own difficulties and problems and challenges. And actually, that's the idea of the whole program, right?
So I'm trying to think if I ever have. I rarely have done work with an intact team where some external HR person has said they should do this.
Okay.
So that's the starting point, I'd say. It's been a business leader who has come to me. Even within Microsoft, we used this approach, and it was always the business leader that came. The HR person might say, oh, Shannon, I think you can help, but I wouldn't work with them if it wasn't someone in the business team, in the actual team, that said, yeah, I think this could help us. So I guess that's the starting point is I really would want someone interested in the approach and believing that this could help.
Okay.
I don't want it imposed on them. So then...
So let me get this straight. I understand that if you heard this from the HR people, you would somehow consult it with at least somebody or some people from the end group, so to speak. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if an HR person came and said, "Hey, I think that this X team is challenged because they don't trust each other, they don't work well together," I would ask to speak to the leader of that team as a starting point and find out how they felt the team was working together, what they thought the issues were, and decide with that leader whether this could be an approach that might make sense and might help them. Yeah. And if that leader said, yeah, I think we should go for it, then we could start there. Then I have an example in mind of a client where this was sort of the case. It wasn't an HR person who came to me. It was the leader in the first place, but he was concerned that his team there wasn't much trust. And we did multi-problem, and actually he started. So he brought a challenge first. And I think by his being vulnerable to bringing a challenge, and he brought a challenge that was a challenge for the team. And they saw the power of it, then they were able to better open up and bring their own. In one other example, there was a leader that I worked with, and she had experienced action learning, felt her team wasn't bonding well, and it was a matrix situation where some of them were, but some of them were outside the matrix and weren't. And what we did with that was bring a couple people from the matrix in to the action learning and along with the intact team. And they actually worked on, it was really a single problem in actual fact. They worked on the problem of how to work better. Like we don't work well together. And that was great. That was really effective. And they put a whole lot on the table. But again, it was the leader herself was committed to it and engaging with it. Did that answer your question,
Yeah,
Tom?
absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. I'm also interested in the marketing and the selling part of the action learning work, so to speak. So when you talk to your clients, what do they buy in action learning? You said that you don't always talk to them about action learning, I guess, right? You just present the work that you will do, but you have action learning in mind and they say, okay, let's do it. Why do they say let's do it? What are they buying in the form that you're offering them? What is in action learning? What do you think is action learning that people want to buy? People from organizations
I get
from
it.
corporations.
I mean, you know, I'm not a person who believes in one tool at all. I am not. And so I want to believe that we do a good job listening to our clients and then offering techniques and tools and experiences that will help them. And so like the work we do is really bespoke and very, very customized to the issues that we're hearing. And so if I do a good job listening to my clients, which I hope I do, then I start with that. I start with, this is what I hear you're struggling with. And I repeat that back. And then I present them with what I think will help them with that and why or how. And when it's action learning, which there often is that, like I say, as part of it, not always, but often, I think the reason depends a little bit on the challenge that they're facing.
Okay.
But I think, you know, it's a problem-solving method that helps people learn at the same time as they make progress on real challenges. And I think that's really compelling for a lot of business leaders because all businesses have challenges. And if you can learn and solve this problem, whatever problem it is, that usually they bring a leadership problem to me. And if they think they can work on that at the same time as making progress on real work, then that's quite a compelling way of doing that.
So I'm hearing that the predominant feature of action learning is the fact that, which your clients are buying, is the fact that simultaneously it works on problems and brings solutions and allows people to learn.
I think so. I mean, that might be my own bias that I'm bringing in. To me, I mean, I started as a client. I started within a company trying to resolve business challenges for my company. And that was an incredibly powerful sell for me. Like that was great. I mean, that to me, that was, you can't do that with a lot of leadership development.
Right.
And I think that really was important. But I also feel that it is very highly dependent on what the client brings as the challenge. And, you know, there are lots of things that action learning is good at, like we talked about. So if they bring a trust issue, then I can clearly talk about, I have loads of evidence from past like experiences that show that it helps to build trust. So I could talk to them about that, and maybe that's why they're buying it and not the actual fact that it works on business challenges. I don't know.
I want to check with...
You see what I mean?
Sorry.
It depends on them. It depends on them.
Yeah. I want to check with you one thing. When I sell action learning to companies, especially large companies, corporations, I think the predominant or two predominant features of action learning that they're looking for is, one is that it is something new, something that their managers have not been through yet, because their managers have been through everything, every single possible training and workshop. And so they don't, sometimes I even hear, Tom, they don't need to learn anymore. They have learned what they are supposed to know and able to do. We want them to talk to each other and draw conclusions from how they work. So number one is that it's something new, something that those people have not been through yet. And maybe one other thing is that it is so based on the real work the real challenges. It's not
Yeah.
the trainer who is teaching them something or presenting them with something, models, theories, case studies, and exercises during a workshop, but it's just a discussion on something that is important for them or for the organization. Do you hear something like that too?
Definitely the second one.
Okay.
100%. So, you know, pretty much everything we do is experiential, and I don't want that to be experiential based on theory. I want it to be real. And I think my clients do too. So I absolutely hear the second one. The first one's interesting within the UK. Not all my clients are in the UK, and in fact, many of them are not. But within the UK, there's quite a lot of knowledge about action learning, and there are different forms of action learning in play. They all have sort of the same foundation, but there are some differences. And so sometimes my clients have a past experience of action learning. Sometimes that's been a positive, and they bring in, positive awareness of what it can offer. Sometimes it's been less positive, and then they're really pleasantly surprised by the method we use if they move forward with us. So I think because I'm in the UK, it's not often new. Having said that, I think anything that gets leaders back to working and learning through working is something that clients are interested in. I agree. It's like there's only so much you can force to them. They need to experience it in order to get value from it.
I love the fact that you are combining business work with social work. And I think you even mentioned one example, if I heard you correctly, the one for BNP Paribas, which I also worked for, teaching some action learning to the internal trainers here in Poland in that bank.
Right.
And as far as I remember, you mentioned that you worked with some leaders who picked some charities that they did some projects for. Is that correct?
So, well, we do a lot of different kinds of work with positive impact. I'm trying to think of the situation that you're describing. I don't know which client that is, but do you want some examples of work we've done?
Absolutely. That's what I'm
outside of
aiming
BNP
at. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we often have clients that already have established relationships with charities, but they're not doing work that's actually skills-based. So they're giving money, for example, and they're not doing anything to use their skills for positive impact. And for me, the most powerful positive impact is skills-based, where there's actually alignment between what you do and the company and its bottom line. Because certainly with positive impact work, there's benefit at a societal level, or should be. And I think there is benefit for the company as well, at the leadership level and at the company level. And so we've done quite a lot of work where companies use action learning with their partners that they are giving money to in order to really enhance the positive impact they're having. So that's another way we use action learning.
So what is that exactly structured like? Like you serve as the learning coach for a group that consists of partially from business people and partially from the charity people?
Yeah, typically. So because of my strong belief that the problem presenter, as it were, gets the most value if they stay within the actual problem. So the sponsor is in the problem. We usually do work where somebody from the partner organization or the charity that the company has just been supporting financially comes. And there are two reasons that's great, right? One is that they get the action learning benefit and the actions that come out and the business support and the business consulting, as it were. Second is they get the learning. So we often hear from our social partners that the value they received, in addition to the ahas and insights, is the fact that they got leadership development and they have learned new ways of working and the power of open questions, all those cool benefits that we talked about earlier. They get those too. because they've been involved the whole time.
Right. The predominant topic of this webinar is action learning in leadership development. That's a broad topic. We talked about different projects, single problem, multi-problem. We talked about social impact projects. Are there, excuse me, any other ways in which you use action learning in your work?
We talked about team effectiveness. We talked about leadership development programs. We've talked about, well, yes, there's one more. I have run programs where I've brought individuals from very different sectors together into an action learning group to do multi-problem action learning. I think that's quite frequently done across WILD, but we don't talk about it all that often. So it doesn't have to be an intact team to do multi-problem. Actually, people learn very well from each other, coming in from different industries, sometimes even different professions. That diversity is really powerful. And so we also will do effectively like learning circles that are formulated from different industries and companies.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally support that. Even there is research from Google Corporation showing that one of the, I guess, major features of a good manager in Google is that he works across the organization, which means that he can cooperate with people not only from his team or from his department or her department for that matter, but from different people across the organization. So building diverse teams like that can help a lot. And I find that if you have intact teams, action learning can be a great method for team coaching, but at the same time, there is this risk that they will fall into the known and common pattern of thinking, and we'll see very little perspectives, or very few perspectives, very few other ways of thinking about certain situations, as opposed to the situation in which they have at least one or two people from the outside. I guess that's why we promote the role of the pizza man in action learning.
So like that example that I told you about where there was an intact team and they brought in a couple people from their matrix. I think if I see the risk of that, we'll often suggest that they think of someone outside the normal scope to bring in, because I don't know how familiar your listeners are about the pizza man, but having someone with really diverse perspective really helps bring completely different insights. And one other way I use action learning, by the way, which is really important to me and maybe self-evident, but we use it within our team. So we meet as a team online. My team is globally distributed. We meet as a team online every 5 weeks.
How many people are there in your team?
10.
10 people.
There are 10 coaches. So what we do about every other meeting is one of us coaches, one of us brings a challenge, and then a few people will observe because the group is usually a little bit too big. And we work on real challenges that we're facing in our business. And it's great because actually we were doing this long before the pandemic. And it meant that all of my team had a lot of practice coaching virtually. We were very comfortable with that. So when March hit, it was zero transition time to do that effectively.
Yeah, I love the fact that you actually do what you preach, so to speak.
I think that's generally a good practice.
If you were to give a piece of advice or pieces of advice to somebody who wants to start with action learning and use some action learning tools, maybe they have not been through the calc program yet, but they know some basics of action learning. They have heard you talking about action learning, and they already are trainers or coaches or consultants, so they are skilled in other ways of helping people, and they want to use some elements of action learning. What would you tell them?
Well, I would probably tell them the same thing I hear from my leaders when they've experienced action learning and they come back later for coaching and reflect on what they took away. So I think that you can apply some of the pieces of action learning in your other work. And I find myself doing that in my leadership, in my coaching, as other people do. So one thing is pausing, almost like a bystander, in the Cantor 4-player model, if you're familiar with that. But pausing and reflecting on what is happening in a conversation or in a meeting, and kind of stepping above that and checking in on that. So how are we doing as a team, on a scale of 1 to 10? What's going well? What could be even better? So that pause to reflect and learn is really powerful and can be applied in lots of different contexts, in training as well as if you're a trainer or a coach. I think the second is really thinking about whether you're working on the same problem and there's agreement on the problem at hand. I often have leaders come back to me and say that was a huge eye-opener for them.
Yeah.
And now when they work, they'll stop and ask people, what problem are we working on?
Yeah.
Are we actually all working on the same thing? What are we trying to solve here? So I think those are really practical things that you can do. I think if you're a coach and you're interested in action learning, though, reaching out to someone who does it to try to experience it is massively helpful if you think you want to get more into it. Because we've got some stuff online that shows what it's like, but there's a big difference between hearing about it and experiencing it. So I think reaching out to someone to try to get a demo or be in a group would be really helpful.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard about 2 very useful tools from action learning that you can use. So if I were to sum it up, I would just say every now and again, if you are trainers, consultants, coaches, facilitators, and you run your groups, you run your meetings, things you can do is every time and again, you can stop your group and ask some questions that will help the group draw conclusions. For example, you can use those questions that you, Shannon, have just mentioned. How are we doing on a scale from 1 to 10 as far as our cooperation is concerned? But you can ask about different things as far as the listening in the group is concerned, or as far as the dynamics or the progress towards solving the problem or developing solutions is concerned, or what are we doing well? What can we do better? And whether we're talking about the same problem. These are some questions you can use in not only in action learning setting or sessions, but in every meeting. And I love the fact that you have just said it, Shannon, because it's interesting that we didn't speak about this at all before the meeting. And what you just said is one of the goals, one of the objectives that I talk about when I start my school of action learning, my calc program of action learning. I tell my students that one of the goals of this program is to learn action learning as a cohesive tool from A to Z. But another goal, another objective is to learn different methods, techniques, and things that they can use in other parts of their work, in other ways of working with groups and teams, in workshops, in facilitation, in other ways of team coaching maybe, or running meetings as team managers. An interesting story is that one of my students who graduated from the calc program, from the School of Action Learning that I run, who also is a trainer in, so to speak, hard skills. He's an internal trainer in a production company. He actually messaged me on Facebook a few weeks after our training about one difficult group that he had. He had a 2-day workshop with them. And he said, Tom, after the first day in the hotel, I was thinking, what am I going to do the second day? Like, how am I going to survive the second day? The group was so difficult. And what he did in the morning of the second day, he asked them 2 basic questions from action learning. What are we doing well in this workshop? And what can we do better as a group in this workshop? And suddenly they opened up. At least this is what he said. But they opened up. They started, first of all, appreciating each other in some aspects of their work. But they were also talking about what they actually can change so that this meeting, which lasted the whole day, can be more efficient than the previous day. And he said it worked, and the group was very different the second day. So even so simple techniques and tools from action learning can be used in a very effective way. One last thing, you said, Shannon, we both mentioned the pizza person, the pizza man, and you said, well, I'm not sure how familiar your listeners are with the pizza person. I'm not sure either, because I'm sure some certified action learning coaches will be listening to this, but maybe some people who are totally new to action learning. Can you, and I explained this story a few times in my webinars. Can you say how you remember this story about this pizza person, so that everybody understands?
I'll do my best.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a bit of urban legend, but it is true. I think it started from a true situation. So there was a team of people who were working in the US, in Washington, D.C., I believe it was, on a challenge, and they were really struggling with it. And the meeting was running into the evening. They were using action learning, but they had been working on it for quite some time. And they ordered some pizza. And when the pizza person arrived with the pizza, they kind of on a whim asked him to stay. And so he got permission to stay in there and sat down. I think he must have wondered what in the world he was doing. And I don't know if they paid him or not, but I hope they did. And he was looking up at the whiteboard, and they continued their work. And at some point he said, I'm listening to what you're talking about, and I see A, B, C, and D. And I don't understand why you need C. Like, why can't you just do A, B, D? And why do you need C at all? And that question, which was quite out of left field for the group that had been working on it, really, really changed the whole solution to the problem they were working on, and ended up saving like many, 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 many dollars. And so what we learned from that was the power of bringing in someone who has a really, really different point of view.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a true story. I remember Mike Marquardt describing it in his book. He even mentioned the name of the guy who invited the pizza person over, but I can't remember. But it's pretty much, that's pretty much the whole idea. Thanks so much. Shannon, we're slowly coming to the end. Is there anything else that you would like to say that is action learning related? It relates to the leadership development work that you do, and that you can share with our audience who are basically learning and development professionals, trainers, coaches, consultants. Some of them are managers. Is there anything else that you would like to say about action learning to that audience from your experience?
No, I would just reiterate that it's, while it sounds simple, it's actually incredibly powerful, and harder to do than it sounds like. And there's learning in that. So I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying people think, oh yeah, you're just using questions to solve a problem. But actually, when you get into it, people really find that hard. And the fact that they find that hard is a huge learning for people. And so experience it. I think it would be the thing I would recommend, is find a way to just try it if you're interested in learning more.
Thanks so much, Shannon. It was great to have you on the show.
It's really nice to be here. Thank you, Tom.
For those of you who want to learn more about action learning, in Poland we do help people get certified in action learning, and we teach action learning. Currently, we do both versions. We do online versions of the School of Action Learning and the stationary version of the School of Action Learning. If you go to whilepoland.org, again, whilepoland.org, you will see this website address at the bottom. And if you are on YouTube right now, you will also see that link in the description below. You can take a look at what the School of Action Learning looks like and what to do to get certified. And you can also schedule a call with me. It's a free call, but I help through some questions and through some information that I give in that call. I help you decide whether action learning is for you, whether it's for your organization, and whether this is a good moment for you to learn action learning. So if you're interested, go to whilepoland.org, use the link, that you can see right now, or go to the link in the description. And if you wish, let me know, schedule a call with me and we can talk. Shannon, thanks so much again, and I will see you guys very soon in our next webinar.
Thank you, Tom.